a Friendsgiving dinner, a bedtime story of found family. Some families we are born with, and some families we build ourselves, piece by piece, with laughter and shared meals. This is a story about that kind of family, a found family, and the special warmth of a Thanksgiving made of friendship. The afternoon light was turning golden as it slanted through the kitchen windows, catching dust motes that danced in the warm air like tiny, lazy snowflakes. Outside, November had painted the neighborhood in shades of rust and amber. The trees mostly bare now, their branches reaching up like gentle hands against a sky that promised an early evening. Inside, the apartment held a different kind of warmth, the kind that comes from careful preparation and quiet anticipation. The kitchen counter was crowded with bowls and cutting boards, evidence of a day spent cooking. There was flour dusted across the black granite, a few stray rosemary leaves near the sink, and the lingering scent of butter and brown sugar from the sweet potato casserole that had come out of the oven 20 minutes ago, its marshmallow topping golden and just barely crisp at the edges. The host. Let's simply know them as someone who understands that home is not just a place, but a feeling you create. Move through the kitchen with the kind of calm focus that comes from doing something you love for people you love even more. They had started early that morning, before the sun had fully risen, when the streets were still quiet and the world felt like it was holding its breath. There was something meditative about those early hours, about measuring flour and rolling dough, about the way the kitchen gradually filled with warmth and fragrance. The pie had been first, a pumpkin pie made from their grandmother's recipe, the one written on an index card in fading blue ink, the paper soft and slightly stained from years of use. The crust had been rolled out on the counter, the dough cool and smooth under their hands, and they had worked it gently, pressing it into the pan with care, crimping the edges just the way they had been taught. Then had come the casserole, the turkey breast that was now resting under foil, and the cranberry sauce simmering on the back burner, filling the apartment with its tart sweetness. But it was not about perfection. It never had been. It was about the gesture, about creating something with your hands to share with the people who had become, over the years, and through the small accumulations of shared experience, your family. The table was set, or mostly set. Plates that didn't quite match sat at each place setting, some from a thrift store, some inherited, one or two purchased on a whim at a flea market because they were too beautiful not to buy. The silverware was similarly mismatched, a collection rather than a set, but somehow that felt right. That felt honest. Cloth napkins in deep burgundy sat folded beside each plate, and in the center of the table, a low arrangement of autumn leaves and small white candles waited to be lit. The host had spent a good 15 minutes getting it just right, adjusting the leaves, moving the candles a fraction of an inch one way and then another, until it felt balanced without looking too deliberate. They glanced at the clock. 20 minutes until the first guests were supposed to arrive, which meant probably 30 minutes in reality, and that was fine. That was perfect, actually. It gave time to check on things one more time, to adjust the temperature on the mulled cider warming on the stove, to make sure there were enough clean glasses to simply stand in the kitchen and take a breath and remember why this mattered. Because it did matter. These gatherings, these deliberate creations of warmth and connection, they were not just nice things. They were necessary things. In a world that often felt fractured and fast, where everyone was always rushing somewhere else, these moments of slowing down, of sitting together and sharing food and stories and time, they were small acts of resistance. They were ways of saying, we belong to each other. We choose each other. Not because we have to, but because we want to. Because somewhere along the way, through late-night phone calls and coffee dates and the kind of conversations that last until 3 in the morning, through showing up when someone needed you and letting someone show up for you, through all of that, you had built something real. The host pulled out their phone and checked the group chat, smiling at the messages that had been accumulating throughout the day. Leaving in 10 minutes, bringing my famous deviled eggs, and also my mediocre sense of humor, read one. Running a little late, but I have PI, so you have to forgive me, said another. Can't wait to see everyone. Needed this so much, read a third, and something in that last message made the host's chest feel warm and tight at the same time. They moved through the apartment one more time, not anxiously but with attention, making sure everything was ready. The living room was tidy but not sterile, with throw pillows arranged on the couch and a soft blanket draped over the armchair, the kind of space that invited you to settle in and stay. The bathroom had fresh hand towels and extra toilet paper and a small vase of flowers on the counter. Music played softly from a speaker, something instrumental and warm, just loud enough to fill the silence without demanding attention. And then, right on time, or rather, right on time by their standards, which meant 15 minutes late, the doorbell rang. The host felt their heartbeat quicken in that pleasant way it does when something you have been looking forward to is finally about to begin. They wiped their hands on a dish towel, ran a hand through their hair in a gesture that was more habit than necessity, and walked to the door. When they opened it, the November evening air rushed in, cool and crisp, carrying with it the smell of wood smoke from someone's fireplace and the rustle of leaves. And there, standing on the doorstep with a grin that could light up a room, and their arms full of a casserole dish wrapped in a kitchen towel, was the first arrival. "Happy Friendsgiving," they said, and the words felt like coming home. The host stepped back to let them in, taking the casserole dish, still warm, they could feel the heat through the towel, and setting it on the counter while the guest shrugged out of their coat. There was the familiar dance of arrival, the "where should I put this and can I help with anything?" The easy comfort of people who had done this before, who knew each other well enough that the rhythms came naturally. The guest followed the host into the kitchen, leaning against the counter and immediately dipping a spoon into the cranberry sauce for a taste. "Perfect," they declared, and the host laughed, swatting at their hand in a gesture that had no real force behind it. Before they could settle into conversation, the doorbell rang again. And then again, 5 minutes later. And suddenly the apartment was filling up, the quiet anticipation transforming into something alive and buzzing with energy, but gentle energy, the kind that comes from reunion rather than excitement, from comfort rather than performance. Each person who arrived brought not just food but their own particular flavor of presence. There was the friend who immediately kicked off their shoes and went straight to the kitchen to see what needed doing, who started uncovering dishes and exclaiming over each one. There was the one who brought wine and made sure everyone had a glass before taking one for themselves. There was the one who arrived with stories already bubbling out, tales from their week that had everyone laughing within minutes. And there was the quieter one, the one who arrived with their shoulders slightly hunched against the cold, but whose smile when they were handed a warm drink and pulled into a hug was like watching the sun come out. Coats piled up on the bed in the spare room. Shoes accumulated by the door. The kitchen counter became a crowded landscape of dishes. Green bean casserole with fried onions on top. A massive bowl of mashed potatoes with butter melting in a well at the center. Glazed carrots, dinner rolls still warm from the oven. A salad with pomegranate seeds that looked like little jewels. And on and on. Someone had brought a cheese board, and it appeared on the counter, a work of art with different cheeses arranged around clusters of grapes and crackers. Another person had brought homemade apple cider, and soon it was warming on the stove next to the mulled cider, the two fragrances mingling into something complex and wonderful. The kitchen, which had felt spacious when it was just the host, now felt full in the best possible way. People leaned against counters and perched on stools. They reached around each other for serving spoons and taste-tested each other's dishes, offering compliments and constructive criticism in equal measure. Someone was telling a story about a cooking disaster from last year, gesturing wildly with a wooden spoon, and everyone was listening with the kind of attention that said they had heard the story before, but were happy to hear it again, because it was funny, and also because the telling of it was part of the ritual. The host moved through it all with a feeling of deep contentment. This was what they had hoped for. This comfortable chaos. This sense of everyone being exactly where they wanted to be. They caught glimpses of faces in profile, lit by the warm kitchen light, and felt a rush of affection so strong it was almost overwhelming. These people, these wonderful, complicated, beautiful people, who had somehow found each other in the bigness of the world and decided to keep finding each other again and again. Someone turned up the music slightly, and suddenly there was dancing, or at least what passed for dancing in a crowded kitchen. which mostly meant swaying and the occasional spin. The friend who had brought deviled eggs was demonstrating their signature move, which involved a lot of shoulder action and no regard whatsoever for rhythm, and everyone was laughing, that kind of laughter that comes from the belly and leaves you a little breathless. And through it all, there was the food. Always the food. Not just as sustenance, but as a language, as a way of saying things that were sometimes hard to put into words. Each dish told a story. The deviled eggs were a story about someone's grandmother and Sunday dinners and the way certain flavors could transport you across decades. The mashed potatoes were a story about comfort and indulgence and the belief that butter makes everything better. The green bean casserole was a story about tradition, about making the same thing every year because that's what Thanksgiving means, even if the people you are sharing it with have changed. One friend had brought a dish from their culture, something fragrant with spices that nobody else had tasted before, and they were explaining what was in it, passing around forkfuls for everyone to try, their face bright with pride and maybe a little nervousness. And everyone tried it, and everyone loved it, and the friend relaxed visibly, their shoulders dropping as they realized, perhaps again, that this was a safe space to be fully themselves, to share the parts of their heritage and history that mattered to them. The host was slicing the turkey breast, the knife moving through the tender meat with satisfying ease. They arranged the slices on a platter, fanning them out and garnishing them with sprigs of fresh thyme when they felt a presence beside them. It was the quieter friend, the one who had arrived looking cold and slightly overwhelmed, and they were holding 2 glasses of wine. "For you," they said, handing one to the host. "You have been running around taking care of everyone. Take a breath." The host accepted the glass gratefully and did exactly that. Took a breath, a real one, deep and slow. They clinked their glass against their friends, and for a moment, in the midst of all the happy chaos, they stood there together in comfortable silence. There was something profound in it, in being seen, in being reminded to take care of yourself by someone who cared enough to notice when you were unt. "Thank you for this," the friend said quietly, and their voice had an edge to it that spoke of needs met and loneliness eased. "I didn't realize how much I needed it until I got here." The host felt their throat tighten slightly. "Me too," they said, and meant it completely. The friend smiled, squeezed the host's arm once, and then drifted back into the flow of people, leaving the host with a full glass of wine and a fuller heart. Gradually, naturally, the energy in the kitchen began to shift. The dishes were all out now, the counters covered with enough food to feed an army, or at least a small battalion of hungry friends. Someone called out that everything was ready, and there was a gentle migration, everyone picking up dishes or utensils or glasses and moving toward the dining room, carrying with them the warmth and laughter that had been building in the kitchen. The host was the last to leave the kitchen, standing for a moment in the doorway and looking back at the beautiful mess they had made, flour still on the counter, empty wine glasses, a few dirty spoons in the sink. It would all need to be cleaned up eventually, but not now. Now was for something else. They turned off the kitchen light, leaving just the small light over the stove, and followed their friends toward the table. The dining room glowed with candlelight now, the flames flickering gently and casting dancing shadows on the walls. The mismatched plates suddenly looked intentional, artful even, and the food that covered the table in abundance seemed to glow in the warm light. Everyone was finding their seats, pulling out chairs and settling in, and the conversations that had been loud and overlapping in the kitchen were beginning to soften, to become more focused, as if everyone understood without being told that they were transitioning into something different, something more intentional. The host took their seat at the head of the table, and for a moment they just looked around at all these faces they loved, illuminated by candlelight, full of anticipation and contentment and something deeper, something that looked a lot like belonging. And they thought, not for the first time and certainly not for the last, how lucky they were, how impossibly, wonderfully lucky. The dining room held them all, but just barely. It was a cozy space to begin with, made cozier by the number of people now seated around the table. Chairs had been borrowed from the bedroom and the office. Someone sat on a bench that usually lived against the wall, but somehow, impossibly, everyone fit. Elbows occasionally bumped elbows, Someone had to ask for a dish to be passed rather than reaching for it themselves. But that was part of it, part of the charm. The closeness was not accidental. It was necessary. It was what made this feel less like a meal and more like an embrace. The candles flickered between them, small flames that seemed almost alive in their gentle movement. The host had chosen unscented candles deliberately, not wanting anything to compete with the smell of the food, and now they were glad they had. The room smelled like everything good about autumn, like roasted vegetables and fresh bread, like spices and wine, like comfort itself, if comfort could have a scent. For a moment, there was relative quiet as everyone settled, as hands reached for napkins and glasses were positioned, and someone at the end of the table laughed softly at something whispered to them by their neighbor. The host felt the weight of the moment, the preciousness of it. All of these people, with their full lives and busy schedules and countless other things they could be doing, had chosen to be here. Had chosen this table, this food, this company. And that choice meant everything. Someone. It was always someone. There was always someone brave enough to break the comfortable silence, cleared their throat slightly, and raised their glass. "Should we say something?" they asked, and it was a question, but also an invitation. "Before we eat?" There was a murmur of agreement, and suddenly everyone was lifting their glasses, the candlelight catching in the wine and making it glow ruby red and golden amber. The host felt their heart begin to beat a little faster, not from nervousness but from anticipation, from knowing what was coming and already feeling the emotion of it rising in their chest. "I'll start," said the person who had suggested it, and their voice was warm and slightly rough with feeling. "I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being my family when my family is 1,000 miles away. Thank you for making this feel like home." There was a chorus of hear, hear, and clinking glasses, and someone else jumped in. "I am grateful for this tradition. I am grateful that we keep doing this, year after year, that we make time for it, for each other." And then it was flowing, person after person adding their voice. And each contribution was different, but somehow also the same. Variations on a theme of gratitude and love and belonging. Someone talked about a hard year and how this group had gotten them through it. Someone else talked about the joy of having friends who knew all your flaws and loved you anyway. One person, their voice breaking just slightly, said that they had never felt like they fit anywhere until they found these people, this table, this sense of being seen and accepted exactly as they were. The host listened, feeling each word like a gift. They had known, of course, how much these friendships meant to everyone. But hearing it said aloud, hearing it witnessed and acknowledged, that was different. That made it real in a new way. When it came around to them, the host took a moment to gather their thoughts, to figure out how to put into words something that felt too big for language. "I am grateful for all of you," they finally said, and their voice was softer than they meant it to be, but also steadier. "I am grateful that we choose each other, that we keep choosing each other, that we have built something real here, something that matters. You are my family. You are my home. And I love you all so much." There was a beat of silence, and then the friend sitting closest to them reached over and squeezed their hand, and someone else said quietly, "We love you too." And suddenly everyone was reaching across the table, hands finding hands, and they sat there for a moment, connected in this simple, physical way. And it felt like a promise, like a commitment, like saying, "Yes, we are in this together. Whatever comes, we have each other." And then, because you cannot stay in intense emotion forever without it becoming overwhelming, someone made a joke, something about the food getting cold, about how they were starving. And the spell broke, but gently, and everyone was laughing and reaching for dishes, and the meal was beginning in earnest. The passing of dishes became its own kind of dance. "Can you send the potatoes this way?" "Who made this stuffing? It is incredible." "Save room for dessert. There are 3 kinds of pie." Plates filled up, became small works of art in themselves, little landscapes of food arranged with care or with abandon, depending on the personality of the person holding the plate. The host watched all of this with deep satisfaction. The green beans were being passed, and the cranberry sauce, and someone was offering to carve more turkey, and someone else was already going back for seconds on the stuffing. The conversations that had been quiet and intentional during the gratitude sharing were now expanding again, splitting into smaller conversations between neighbors at the table, stories being told, laughter rising and falling like waves. The friend who had brought the dish from their culture was explaining the spices again to someone who wanted to try making it themselves, and they were writing down the recipe on a napkin, their handwriting cramped and small to fit all the instructions. Two people at the end of the table were engaged in a heated but good-natured debate about the best way to make pie crust, and it was clear that neither was going to concede, but they were both enjoying the argument too much to care. Someone had started humming along with the music playing softly in the background, and someone else had joined in, and now there was this lovely undertone of melody weaving through the conversation. The host took a bite of everything, tasting each dish not just for the flavors, but for the care that had gone into it, for the generosity of the person who had made it and brought it to share. The sweet potato casserole was perfect, the sweetness balanced by just a hint of cinnamon. The mashed potatoes were creamy and rich with butter. The turkey was tender and juicy, not dry at all. And the stuffing was maybe the host's favorite, full of herbs and onions and that particular texture that only stuffing has, both soft and slightly crisp at the same time. But more than the taste of the food was the taste of the moment itself. That particular flavor that comes from being exactly where you want to be, with exactly the people you want to be with, doing exactly what you want to be doing. It was the taste of contentment, of satisfaction, of joy that was quiet but also deep, running through everything like a current. Time did something strange during dinner. It both rushed and slowed. Rushed in that before anyone knew it, plates were empty and being refilled. Slowed in that each bite seemed to last forever. Each conversation felt unhurried. Each moment felt full and complete in itself. There was no pressure to be anywhere else, to do anything else. This was it. This was the thing, and everyone knew it, even if they were not thinking about it consciously. It was there in the way they leaned back in their chairs between courses, in the way they lingered over bites, in the way they listened to each other with full attention. Someone got up to refill the wine glasses, moving around the table and pouring with generous hand, and the host noticed how comfortable everyone looked, how at ease. No one was sitting up straight or worrying about manners in the formal sense. People had elbows on the table and were talking with their mouths half full, and were reaching across each other for dishes without asking first, because they were that comfortable, that familiar. It was the opposite of the stiff, awkward dinners the host remembered from childhood, where you had to mind your manners and not speak unless spoken to, and certainly never, ever put your elbows on the table. This was better. This was real. This was what family should feel like, easy and warm and forgiving. "Okay, I need to know," said one of the friends, pointing their fork at another friend across the table. "Tell everyone the story about the turkey disaster from 2 years ago. Please, I know we have heard it before, but it is too good not to share again." The friend in question groaned dramatically, but they were smiling. "Must I?" they asked, but everyone was already chanting, "Yes, yes, yes." And so they launched into the story, their hands gesturing wildly, their voice rising and falling with practiced timing. It was a story about a turkey that had not been properly thawed, about an oven that had broken halfway through cooking, about a desperate dash to a store that was about to close, and a kind stranger who had basically given them the turkey off their own table. And it was hilarious, but it was also touching, because embedded in the chaos of the story was this truth, that sometimes things go wrong, but sometimes people are kind, and sometimes disasters turn into the best memories. By the time the story wound down, everyone was wiping tears from their eyes, the kind that come from laughing too hard, and someone was clutching their stomach and gasping that they could not breathe. And the friend who had told the story was glowing with the pleasure of having made everyone laugh. "That is it," declared another friend, raising their glass. "From now on, that is our official Friendsgiving legend, the great turkey disaster of whenever it was." 2 years ago, supplied the storyteller, the great turkey disaster of 2 years ago. The friend amended, and everyone raised their glasses in a toast to the turkey that almost wasn't, and to the friend who had managed to salvage Thanksgiving through sheer determination and the kindness of strangers. The meal stretched on, as good meals do. There was no rushing, no sense that they needed to hurry through and get to the next thing. This was the next thing. This was the main event. And so they lingered, even as plates were cleared, and second helpings turned into thirds for those brave enough. Even as the candles burned lower, and the wine bottles emptied and the music changed from one song to another to another. Eventually, though, there was that natural lull that comes when everyone is full, when the eating has slowed and the conversations have found their rhythm, and everyone is just sitting there in satisfied contentment. The host looked around at the table, at the picked-over dishes and the crumpled napkins and the faces of their friends, slightly flushed from wine and warmth and happiness, and thought that they had never seen anything more beautiful. "Okay," someone said, stretching their arms over their head. "I think we need a strategic break before dessert. I'm going to burst." There was a general murmur of agreement, and slowly people started to push back their chairs and stand up, the movement causing the candles to flicker wildly for a moment. Someone started gathering plates, and someone else protested that they should leave it, that they would help clean later, but the host was already up and moving, grateful for something to do with their hands, for the chance to move after sitting for so long. The clearing of the table happened with the same easy cooperation as everything else. Dishes were scraped and stacked, leftovers were covered and put in the fridge, the available space rapidly filling up until they had to start getting creative with how things were arranged. Someone started washing dishes, even though the host protested, and within minutes, there was a full assembly line happening. One person washing one, drying one, putting away, and they were laughing and talking the whole time, the work becoming just another part of the evening's pleasure rather than a chore to get through. The host loved this part, maybe loved it even more than the meal itself, because anyone can sit at a table and eat. But this rolling up of sleeves and jumping in to help, this staying to clean up the mess together, this was what family did. This was what it meant to care for each other, to share not just the good parts, but the less glamorous parts too, to say with your actions that we are in this together, all of it, the cooking and the eating and the cleaning up. By the time the kitchen was mostly restored to order, the pies were out on the counter, ready to be sliced. But nobody was quite ready yet. Stomachs needed time to settle. Bodies needed time to move and digest. And so, as if by unspoken agreement, everyone drifted toward the living room, toward the comfortable furniture and the soft blankets, and the promise of just sitting for a while, of letting the evening settle into something even quieter and more intimate. The living room welcomed them with its soft lighting and comfortable disorder. Someone immediately claimed the armchair, curling up in it with their feet tucked under them. Two people squeezed onto the love seat, fitting together like puzzle pieces. Others arranged themselves on the floor, leaning against the couch or stretching out on the soft rug. The host brought in extra pillows from the bedroom, tossing them to whoever needed them, and someone else grabbed the throw blankets and started distributing them, because even though the apartment was warm, there was something about being wrapped in a blanket that made everything feel cozier. Someone had queued up a playlist of mellow music, and it filled the room with soft sound, not intrusive but comforting, like a gentle presence. The candles from the dining room had been brought in and placed on the coffee table, and their flickering light was the only illumination beyond the one small lamp in the corner. The effect was almost magical, turning the ordinary living room into a cocoon of warmth and safety. For a while, nobody talked much. They just sat there, full and content, occasionally shifting to get more comfortable, or reaching for a glass of water, or making small sounds of satisfaction. It was the comfortable silence of people who did not need to fill every moment with noise, who were secure enough in their connection that quiet was okay, that it was even welcome. The host found themselves on the couch, wedged between two friends, and it was a little too warm and slightly cramped, but also absolutely perfect. Someone's head was on their shoulder, and they could feel the steady rise and fall of their friend's breathing, could feel them relaxing into sleep or near sleep. On their other side, another friend was scrolling absently through their phone, but not really looking at it, just occupying their hands while their mind was somewhere else, probably in that pleasant fuzzy place that comes from good food and good wine and good company. "This is nice," someone said from the floor, their voice drowsy and content. "This is really nice." "Mm-hmm," someone else agreed, and that was all the conversation needed. It was nice. It was more than nice. It was exactly what they all needed, had been needing without maybe fully realizing it until this moment. This permission to just be, to just exist in a space with people who loved you and whom you loved back, with no expectations or demands, just presence. The host felt their eyes growing heavy, felt their body sinking deeper into the couch cushions. Around them, their friends were in various states of repose, some alert, some drowsy, all comfortable. Someone had put on a nature documentary, the volume low, and the soothing voice of the narrator was talking about migration patterns or seasonal changes or something that required no real attention, but was pleasant to have on in the background. Time slipped by, measured not in minutes but in breaths, in the occasional shift of position, in the gradual deepening of shadows as the candles burned lower. At some point, the host could not have said exactly when, someone got up and went to make coffee, and the sound of the coffee maker gurgling and hissing was comforting in its domesticity. Soon the smell of fresh coffee was mixing with the lingering sense of dinner, and people were rousing themselves enough to accept mugs, wrapping their hands around the warm ceramic and breathing in the steam. "Okay," said the friend who had made the coffee, settling back into their spot on the floor with their own mug. "I think I am ready for pie now. Who is with me?" There was a general murmur of agreement, and the host leveraged themselves up off the couch with effort, their body protesting the movement after so long in one position. They made their way to the kitchen, flipping on the light and squinting against the brightness, and started cutting the pies into generous slices. The pumpkin pie first, its filling smooth and spiced. Then the apple pie, the lattice crust golden brown and flaky. And finally, the pecan pie, its top shiny with sugar and studded with nuts. People wandered in to claim their slices, and there was a brief negotiation about who wanted which pie, and several people wanted a little of each, which meant cutting more slices until the pies were a patchwork of missing pieces. Someone found a can of whipped cream in the fridge and started spraying it directly into mouths, which devolved into laughter and mild chaos until the host took it away with mock severity and distributed it properly with generous dollops on top of each slice. Back in the living room, the pie was consumed with reverent attention. This was dessert, but it was also tradition, also comfort, also the sweet conclusion to a meal that had nourished more than just bodies. The pumpkin pie was smooth and creamy, tasting of cinnamon and nutmeg and all the warmth of autumn condensed into a single bite. The apple pie was tart and sweet at once, the apples still holding their shape, the crust buttery and perfect. And the pecan pie was rich and almost overwhelming in its sweetness, the kind of thing you could only eat a few bites of before needing to set it aside, satisfied. Someone declared the pumpkin pie the best they had ever had, and the host felt a flush of pleasure and pride, thinking of their grandmother and that faded recipe card, and the way some things, when made with care and love, could transcend being just food and become something closer to memory, to connection, to love itself made tangible. Plates were balanced on knees and on the arms of chairs, forks scraped against ceramic. Someone made a sound that was almost obscene in its satisfaction, and everyone laughed. The coffee was strong and hot, cutting through the sweetness of the pie, and the combination was perfect, was exactly what was needed. "I cannot believe I ate all of that," someone groaned, setting their empty plate on the coffee table with a clatter. "Why do I do this to myself every year?" "Because it is worth it," someone else replied immediately. "Because this is what Thanksgiving is for, excessive eating and no regrets." "Speak for yourself on the no regrets part," the first person said. But they were smiling, their hand resting on their full stomach in a gesture that looked like contentment despite their words. The host gathered up the empty plates, making another trip to the kitchen. The dishwasher was already full from the first round of cleaning, so these would have to wait. But that was fine. Everything did not have to be done tonight. Some of it could wait until tomorrow, until the morning light and a new day and the pleasant task of putting a home back together after it had been used for its best purpose, gathering people you loved. When they returned to the living room, the energy had shifted again, had settled into something even quieter, even more peaceful. The documentary had ended, and someone had put on music again, something acoustic and gentle, a voice and a guitar and not much else. One person was lying on the floor, staring up at the ceiling, their hands folded on their stomach. Two others were having a quiet conversation in the corner, their heads close together, their voices low enough that they were not disturbing anyone else but sharing something that seemed important, intimate. The friend who had been leaning on the host earlier was now fully asleep, their breathing deep and even, their face peaceful in the way that only comes with true relaxation, with feeling safe enough to let go completely. The host adjusted the blanket over them carefully, tucking it around their shoulders, and felt a wave of tenderness so strong it was almost painful. This person, who worked too hard and worried too much and carried the weight of the world on their shoulders more often than not, was resting, was letting themselves be cared for. And that felt like a gift, like a privilege. The host settled back into their spot, careful not to disturb anyone, and let their gaze wander around the room. These faces, these beautiful, familiar faces, each one had its own story, its own struggles and triumphs and complications. Each one had chosen to be here, had carved out time from their busy lives to create this moment together. And that choice, that commitment to showing up for each other, that was what made this family real. Because blood did not make family, not really. Blood was just biology. Family was who you called when things fell apart. Family was who showed up at 2 a.m. because you needed them. Family was who you could be completely yourself with, flaws and fears and all, and know that you would be accepted, would be loved anyway, would be held in all your imperfection and humanity. Family was who you built, piece by piece, through trust and time, and the accumulation of small kindnesses and big gestures and everything in between. The host thought back over the years, tracing in their mind the threads that had brought all of these people together. Some friendships had started in college, those late-night conversations in dorm rooms that had revealed depths and vulnerabilities and created bonds that had somehow withstood the test of time and distance. Some had started at work, connections forged over shared projects and coffee breaks and the particular intimacy that comes from being in the trenches together. Some had started in more random ways, at a party, through a mutual friend, in a chance encounter that had turned into something more. But however they had started, they had all been sustained by intention. By the choice to keep reaching out, to keep making time, to keep showing up even when it was inconvenient or uncomfortable, even when it would have been easier to let the connection fade. And now, years later, here they all were, woven together into something that felt unbreakable, or at least resilient enough to weather whatever storms came. Someone shifted on the floor, murmuring something in their half-sleep, and someone else reached out to adjust their pillow, an unconscious gesture of care. The person who had been scrolling on their phone set it down, screen dark, and closed their eyes, their head tilting back against the couch cushion. The quiet conversation in the corner had trailed off, and now those two were just sitting in comfortable silence, shoulder to shoulder, present to each other in a way that needed no words. The host felt something swelling in their chest, something that was too big and too complex to name easily, but that felt like gratitude and love and contentment and sorrow all mixed together. Gratitude for this moment, for these people. Love that was almost overwhelming in its intensity. Contentment with the life they had built, with the choices they had made that had led them here. And sorrow because they knew, with the certainty that comes from being alive long enough to know how things work, that this would not last forever, that people would move, would change, would drift away despite best intentions, that someday this configuration of people in this room would never happen again, that everything, even the best things, was temporary. But maybe that was what made it precious. Maybe the impermanence was not something to mourn, but something to honor, something that made each moment more valuable because it could not be taken for granted, could not be assumed to repeat. Maybe the awareness that this was fleeting was what made it matter, what made them all show up with intention and presence, what made them hold these moments close and careful like the treasures they were. The candles on the coffee table were burning low now, the wax pooled and the flames small and steady. The host watched them flicker, mesmerized by the dance of light and shadow, by the way something so simple could be so beautiful. There was a metaphor there, something about light and darkness, about how a small flame could hold back the night. But they were too full and too tired to articulate it fully. They just felt it, felt the truth of it in their body, in their bones. The music shifted to a new song, something slow and lovely, and someone hummed along with it, the sound barely audible, but adding another layer to the soundscape of the room. Outside, night had fully fallen. The windows were dark mirrors reflecting the warm interior of the apartment back at them. Somewhere in the building, someone else was probably having their own Thanksgiving, their own gathering of family or friends or both. And out in the city, thousands of people were sitting down to their own tables, creating their own memories, building their own traditions. But in this room, in this moment, there was only this particular constellation of people, this specific warmth, this exact quality of peace and belonging. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. The host felt their eyes growing heavy again, felt their body relaxing into the couch in that boneless way that comes right before sleep. Around them, their friends were in similar states, some sleeping, some resting, all comfortable, all safe. The apartment held them all like a gentle hand, the walls containing not just bodies, but also all the intangible things that made this space sacred. The laughter and stories, the shared history, the love that had been built and maintained through intention and effort and grace. Someone murmured something about needing to head home soon, but their voice lacked conviction, and nobody moved. It was that particular time of evening when leaving feels impossible, when the warmth and comfort are too strong to break away from, when 5 more minutes turns into 15 turns into half an hour and nobody minds. Nobody is counting. The host thought about suggesting that people could stay over, that there were couches and sleeping bags and plenty of space, and they probably would suggest it eventually when people actually started to stir and gather their things. But for now, they just let everyone be, let the evening wind down at its own pace, unhurried and natural. A phone buzzed somewhere, the sound intrusive in the quiet, and its owner reached for it, checked it with squinted eyes, and then set it back down, clearly deciding that whatever the notification was could wait. The host loved that in this space, the outside world could be temporarily held at bay, that whatever demands and responsibilities waited out there could be set aside for just a little longer in favor of this, of being present to this moment and these people. This was perfect, someone said into the quiet, their voice soft and slightly rough with emotion. Thank you for doing this, for bringing us all together. I needed this more than I knew. The host felt their throat tighten again, felt tears prick at the corners of their eyes even though they were smiling. Thank you for coming, they said, and their voice was equally soft, equally full. Thank you for being my family. There was a murmur of agreement from around the room, a general sense of acknowledgement that yes, this was special, this mattered, this was worth recognizing and naming. And then the quiet settled back in, but it was a different quality of quiet now, charged with emotion and recognition, with the weight of things said and unsaid. The host let their eyes close, just for a moment. They were not sleeping, just resting, just letting themselves feel the fullness of the moment. They could hear the gentle sounds of breathing around them, the occasional rustle of fabric as someone adjusted their position, the barely audible music still playing from the speaker. They could feel the warmth of the people on either side of them, the solid reality of their presence. They could smell the lingering scents of dinner and pie and coffee, all mixed together into something that smelled like home, like comfort, like love. And they thought about all the Thanksgivings that had come before this one, the years of gathering and eating and laughing together, building this tradition piece by piece. They thought about the first time they had all gotten together like this, how nervous they had been, how uncertain whether people would come or whether the food would be good, or whether the whole thing would be awkward and forced. But it had not been. It had been easy and natural and right from the very beginning. And it had only gotten better with each passing year, each gathering building on the last, each shared meal deepening the bonds between them. They thought about the Thanksgivings to come, the ones they hoped they would have together, all of them, for years and years. They knew it would probably change, that people might move away, or have families of their own, or get too busy. But they hoped that they would find ways to keep coming back to each other, to keep creating these moments of connection and warmth. Because this was too precious to let go of, too important to allow to fade. But they also knew that you could not hold on too tightly to anything. that trying to preserve things exactly as they were was a kind of death, that life required change and growth and evolution. So they made a different kind of promise to themselves and to their friends, even though nobody else could hear it. The promise was simply this: to keep showing up, to keep reaching out, to keep making the effort to maintain these connections, even when it was hard, even when life got complicated, even when it would be easier to let things slide. To keep building this family, day by day, choice by choice, moment by moment. Someone's phone buzzed again, and this time the person sat up, blinking sleep from their eyes. "I should probably go," they said reluctantly, and the words seemed to break the spell, to signal that the evening was winding toward its close. Others began to stir, stretching and yawning and reaching for their phones to check the time. It was later than anyone had realized, the hours having slipped away in that particular way that happens when you are exactly where you want to be, doing exactly what you want to be doing. There were groans about early mornings and long drives and the reality of the work week that would start in just a few days. But the movement was slow, reluctant. People gathered their things but did not rush. There were long hugs at the door, the kind that lasted and lasted, bodies pressed together in affection and gratitude. There were promises to text when they got home safe, plans already being made for the next gathering, for coffee next week or dinner next month or just seeing each other soon, however that might work out. The host walked each person to the door, helped them find their coats in the pile on the bed, made sure they had all their dishes and containers. Some people were taking leftovers, the host pressing Tupperware into their hands over their protests, insisting that they wanted people to have food to take home, to have something to remember the evening by when they woke up tomorrow. "Drive safe," the host said to each person, and "Thank you for coming," and "I love you." And each person said it back, some easily and naturally, some with a slight hesitation that spoke of people not used to saying such things out loud, but meaning them just as fiercely. And then, gradually, the apartment emptied. The friend who had fallen asleep on the couch was the last to leave, roused gently and sent home in a rideshare because they were too tired to drive. And then it was just the host, alone in the apartment that still held the warmth and energy of all the people who had filled it just moments before. The silence was profound after so much sound and activity. The host stood in the living room, looking at the evidence of the evening, the empty coffee mugs and rumpled blankets, the candles burned down to almost nothing, the plates still waiting to be washed in the kitchen. Part of them wanted to start cleaning, to restore order and cleanliness, but a larger part wanted to leave it, to preserve the beautiful mess for just a little longer, to not quite let go of the evening yet. They compromised by blowing out the candles and gathering up the mugs, taking them to the kitchen and setting them in the sink, but not washing them. The leftovers were already put away, the kitchen mostly in order from the earlier cleaning. It could all wait until morning. It would still be there, and they would take care of it then, and it would be fine. The host turned off most of the lights, leaving just one lamp burning in the living room, and settled back onto the couch. They pulled one of the blankets around their shoulders, the fabric still holding the warmth of whoever had been using it, and let themselves sink into the cushions. Their body was tired, pleasantly so, the kind of tired that comes from a day well spent. Their heart was full, almost to overflowing, with gratitude and love, and a deep sense of rightness with the world. They thought about each person who had been here tonight, calling up their faces in their mind one by one. The one who always made everyone laugh, the one who listened with such careful attention, the one who brought the most delicious food, the one who was quiet but whose presence was steady and essential, the one who gave the best hugs, the one who always knew the right thing to say, the one who had become, over the years, like a sibling, like the family they had always wanted but never had. Each person was precious. Each person was irreplaceable. And together, they were something even greater than the sum of their parts. They were a family, chosen and built and maintained through love and effort and the thousand small kindnesses that make up a life shared with others. The host felt their eyes growing heavy again, felt sleep beginning to tug at them insistently. They should get up, should go to their bedroom, should brush their teeth and change into pajamas and go to bed properly. But the couch was so comfortable. and they were so warm and content. And the apartment felt so peaceful in the aftermath of the gathering that they could not quite make themselves move. So they stayed there curled up on the couch with a blanket wrapped around them and let their mind drift in that pleasant way it does right before sleep, thoughts floating by without needing to be grabbed or examined too closely. They thought about gratitude, about how it was not just a feeling but a practice, something you had to choose and cultivate and return to again and again. They thought about family, about how it could mean so many different things, about how the most important families were often the ones you built for yourself. They thought about home, about how it was not really a place but a feeling, a sense of safety and belonging that you could create anywhere as long as you had the right people around you. And they thought about this tradition they had started, this Friendsgiving dinner that had become one of the most important rituals of their year. How it had started small and uncertain and had grown into something solid and dependable, something they could count on even as everything else in life shifted and changed. How it was a way of saying to themselves and to their friends that they mattered to each other, that they chose each other, that they were committed to building something real and lasting. The host felt sleep beginning to claim them for real now, felt their thoughts becoming less coherent, more dreamlike. The apartment was quiet around them, holding them safe. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm, but in here, all was peaceful. All was well. They had done what they set out to do. They had brought people together, had created warmth and connection, had made space for love to flourish and for gratitude to be expressed. And as they drifted off to sleep right there on the couch, still wrapped in the blanket, still holding the warmth of the evening close, their last conscious thought was this: that they were lucky beyond measure, that they had everything they needed, that they were loved and they loved in return, and that this right here, this feeling of deep contentment and belonging, this was what it meant to be home. This was what it meant to have family. This was what it meant to be alive in the fullest, richest sense of the word. The apartment held them as they slept, the walls containing not just a person but all the love and laughter and connection that had filled those rooms that evening. And if you had looked in through the windows, you would have seen a space transformed by gathering, by the simple act of people choosing to come together and share a meal and create something beautiful together. You would have seen evidence of care and effort and love made tangible in the form of cleaned dishes and leftover food and rumpled blankets. You would have seen a home, not because of the furniture or the decorations or anything material, but because of what had happened there, because of the way people had gathered and connected and belonged to each other. That was what made a home. That was what made a family. Not blood or law or tradition in the old sense, but choice and love and the commitment to keep showing up for each other, day after day, year after year, through all the seasons of a life. And as the night deepened and the city quieted, as the hosts slept peacefully on the couch with a slight smile on their face, as the warmth of the gathering slowly dissipated, but the memory of it remained, one thing was certain: this was a family, a found family, a chosen family. And that made it no less real, no less important, no less sacred than any other kind. In fact, it made it more so. Because it was built on intention and care, and the daily choice to love and be loved. The leftovers in the refrigerator would feed people for days, each meal a small reminder of this evening, of this gathering, of this love. The dishes would be washed and put away, but they would carry with them the invisible traces of the hands that had used them, the food that had been shared. The apartment would be cleaned and restored to its usual order, but it would remember, in whatever way spaces remember, the laughter and stories and warmth that had filled it. And the people who had gathered here would carry the evening with them as they went back to their lives. They would think of it when they were lonely or struggling, would remember that they had this, had these people, had this belonging. They would text each other, checking in, making plans, maintaining the connections that had been strengthened tonight, and they would look forward to the next gathering, whenever and wherever that might be, because they knew now with certainty that this was something worth protecting, worth prioritizing, worth building a life around. This was family, this was home, this was love in its purest, most generous form. The love that says, you are seen and known and accepted exactly as you are. The love that says, I choose you again and again in all your imperfection and humanity. The love that says, we belong to each other, and that belonging is one of the most precious things in this world. And so the host slept, and the apartment was quiet, and the city hummed on around them, and the night held everything gently, the way a mother holds a sleeping child. And if you could have seen into that space, into that moment, you would have understood something essential about what it means to be human. That we are not meant to be alone, that we need each other in ways both simple and profound, that the creation of family and home and belonging is not a luxury but a necessity, not something nice but something essential. The dishes could wait, the cleaning could wait. What mattered had already happened. What mattered was held safe in memory now in the hearts of all the people who had gathered here and shared a meal and created for a few precious hours a small pocket of warmth and love and belonging in a world that so often feels cold and disconnected. This was what Thanksgiving meant, stripped of all its commercial trappings and complicated history. This was the heart of it, the gathering, the sharing, the gratitude, the acknowledgement of how much we need each other, and how blessed we are when we find our people, however that happens, wherever they come from. And as the host slept on the couch, wrapped in warmth and contentment, as their friends drove home or settled into their own beds, all of them carrying this evening with them, the world continued its endless turning. But for this one moment, for this one evening, a group of people had stopped the rushing forward and had simply been together, had simply loved each other, had simply created, through intention and care, something beautiful and real and true. And that was enough. That was everything. That was the whole point. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of the families you have built, and the tables you have gathered around and the love you have shared, please consider showing your support with a like and subscribe to Deep Sleep Stories Hub for more quiet nights and restful journeys. May you sleep deeply, held safe by the knowledge that you too are loved, that you too belong, that you too have people who choose you again and again in all your beautiful, imperfect humanity. Rest well, dear friend. Rest well.